In this section, we're going to discuss how you can easily assess the health of your metabolism and thyroid at home using simple body temperature and pulse measurements. In my opinion, this is one of the most important modules of the entire guide. So, how do we know if we are producing energy well? How do we know if we have a strong metabolism? How do we know if we have a well-functioning thyroid? Well, the foundation of health under the bioenergetic or pro-metabolic perspective is body temperature and pulse. This is one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Ray Peat. Keeping the metabolic rate up is the main thing, and there are lots of ways to do it. Again, there's no cookie cutter approach. What's important is that we keep our metabolic rate up for optimal health. So what keeps the metabolic rate up? A well-functioning thyroid system. So this is a great graphic from Forefront Health demonstrating the different levels of our thyroid system. And this shows that there's far more to your thyroid health than just your thyroid gland. So we may not always have an issue with our thyroid gland, but if other areas of our body are affected, our cells may not have access to thyroid hormone. For example, how much thyroid hormone is actually getting to your cells? How much thyroid hormone can your cells actually use? So we will now review the 5 different features of the thyroid system. So first, obviously, is the production and secretion of thyroid hormone at the thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland in the front of your neck, and it produces and secretes 2 thyroid hormones called T4 and T3. So T3 is the active thyroid hormone that acts on the cells to increase the metabolism, pulse rate, and body temperature. T3 is what's helping us produce energy. T4 is a storage hormone, which in itself is inactive, but it's converted to active T3 in the liver and partly in some other tissues. Also, in normal situation, small amounts of T4 are converted into RT3, reverse T3, which is inactive. The second part is the liver, where, as I mentioned, T4 is converted to active thyroid hormone T3. The third is your bloodstream that contains transport proteins that carry T3 to your cells. Number 4 are cell receptors that actually accept T3 at the cellular level. And finally, number 5, cell utilization, where our mitochondria actually use T3 to make energy. If we have an issue at any of these steps, we will not have an optimal metabolism and will not be efficiently producing energy. So, how do I know if I have a sluggish thyroid system? Well, it's not hard to have a sluggish thyroid system in this modern world where we are bombarded with toxins. But in this guide, we will help you improve function at each level to optimize your metabolic function. The best test is an evaluation of your body temperature and pulse, which are super simple measurements that you can take at home, in addition to an honest evaluation of body functions. So rather than following diet rules, for example, staying under 30 grams of carbs per day for a keto diet, assessing one's health objectively is much more important. Do I poop every day? Do I sleep well? Do I have good hair growth and strong nails? Do I have clear skin? Is my mood stable? Am I kind to others? Do I have good energy levels? Do I have a libido? Am I happy? Am I hungry? If you answered no to any of the questions above, you could have a sluggish thyroid and impaired metabolism and/or nutritional deficiencies, meaning you are not living optimally. So some characteristics of hypothyroidism include low body temperature and pulse, which we will dive into in future slides, low levels of active thyroid hormone T3, since T4 is not being converted into T3, high cholesterol, since cholesterol isn't being converted into crucial steroid and protective hormones, high cortisol, slow or impaired digestion, and hormonal balances or loss of period for females. So other symptoms include fatigue, increased sensitivity to cold, dry skin, weight gain, muscle weakness, muscle aches, thinning of the hair, and the list goes on. Guys, the thyroid affects every level of our health since the thyroid is the master metabolic regulator and is responsible for how well we produce energy. And remember, energy is required for every body function. So what about thyroid blood work? While it does provide important information, it doesn't always provide accurate thyroid function on the cellular level. However, a full thyroid panel can provide us with some insight on the functionality of your thyroid system and help us understand where you may have a problem in those 5 different steps that we just discussed. So we discuss more about thyroid blood work and ideal thyroid blood work levels in the next module, so stay tuned. There are several things that affect your cellular response to serum circulating thyroid hormone, for example, PUFAs. So you could have normal thyroid levels in your blood work, but your actual thyroid function at the cellular level could be low and thus have an impaired metabolism and reduced ability to produce energy. Your body temperature and pulse measurements help us understand whether our cells are actually metabolizing thyroid hormone properly and are one of the simplest ways to assess the health of your thyroid system. Dr. Ray Peat says, quote, "On average, people have the greatest ability to resist stress and recuperate from injury if their temperature is a little above average and their pulse rate is a little above average. So, your health can be very good for most of your life, but you will have more resilience if your metabolic rate is higher." Body temperature and pulse were actually used regularly to evaluate health before Western medicine became largely drug-focused, with a focus on treating symptoms rather than fixing the root cause of health problems. In the 1930s, health assessments commonly included pulse rate, temperature, serum cholesterol level, carotenonemia, bowel function, and quality of hair and skin, all of which can be related back to thyroid function. In fact, the 1947 Merck Manual, which is the manual used by doctors, included, quote, "Hypothyroidism, a disease in middle life 6 times more common in women than in men, especially liable to occur with menstrual disturbances. Diagnoses: gradual onset of apathy, gain in weight, and development of non-pitting edema, especially of hands, feet, and face. Full moon-like face and coarse features. Skin dry and scaly. Scales best seen in stockings. Hair becomes brittle and thin. Nails rough, striated, and break easily. There is lassitude, fatigability, drowsiness, imperfect cerebration, even psychosis, poor appetite and constipation, pulse slow, blood pressure low, temperature subnormal, menstruation irregular, may cease or become excessive, anemia in majority of cases, hypercholesteremia, high cholesterol." So this method of assessing health from body temperature is largely from the work of Dr. Broda Barnes. However, there is a shortcoming of just using body temperature, because when you become hypothyroid, your body can occasionally compensate by overproducing stress hormones, which can artificially elevate your basal body temperature, giving a, quote, false negative test. Also, when it is very warm outside, your thyroid doesn't have to work very hard to maintain temperature, so you can have good temps but still be hypothyroid due to environmental conditions. So this is where the work of Dr. Ray Peat comes into play by adding in the pulse information on top of the body temperature to assess your thyroid and metabolic health. So including body temperature and pulse data can give a much better picture of what's going on. So what we are shooting for: a high metabolic rate is associated with temps of 97.8 to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit and a pulse of 75 to 90 beats per minute. Chronically low body temps and pulses are signs of a slowed metabolism and decreased cellular function. So common causes of hypothyroidism or a sluggish thyroid system and reduced body temps include fasting, a chronic protein deficiency, environmental pollutants in the food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the cleaning products and beauty care products that we use, excessive stress without sufficient rest, EMFs like our Wi-Fi and phone radiation, nutrient deficiencies, excessive blue light, gut disruption from the crappy food industry, prescription drugs, excessive exercise, especially breathless exercise, diets high in beans, lentils, nuts, PUFAs, and undercooked cruciferous vegetables, cabbage and mustard greens, diets high in beta-carotene, like super orange food, rather than retinol, and excessively drinking cold water without minerals. So again, from this list, you can see how easy it is to have a compromised thyroid system in the modern world. But there is no single cookie cutter plan to improve metabolic health. So the journey to reach good thyroid and metabolic health will look different for every individual. And the simplest way to gauge if we are heading in the right direction in improving our thyroid system and metabolic health is body temp, and pulse measurements. So we'll now provide a little more background information as to why body temperature is vital. So many people understand that our bodies require essential nutrients to survive. But less discussed is the required body temperature. We don't just need nutrients, we need heat as well. Low body temperature and nutrient deficiencies can both impair function of the human body. So ectotherms, like fishes and reptiles, are animals that depend on their external environment for body heat. Whereas endotherms, humans, other mammals, and birds, are animals that use thermoregulation to maintain a somewhat consistent internal body temperature, even when their external environment changes. The optimal temperature at which the human body's systems function best is 37 degrees Celsius. Why? Well, our body temp plays a major role in the function of enzymes and the rate of reactions inside our bodies. So what are enzymes and why are they important? Well, enzymes are built of proteins folded into complicated shapes that are present throughout the body. Enzymes speed up chemical reactions in our body to help support life, helping to perform important tasks such as building muscle, breaking down food during digestion, improving nerve function, replicating DNA, breaking down and clearing out toxins, and the list goes on. However, an enzyme's shape is tied to its function, and the enzyme's shape is dependent on temperature. So when enzymes get too warm, they get too loose. And when they get too cold, they get too tight. When they are just the right temperature, then they are just the right shape, and the chemical reactions that they catalyze take place at the optimal rate with the most ease. When the temperature is too cold or unsteady, the enzymes will spend less time in their optimal shape, which simply translates into having a less than optimal metabolism. So our metabolism rises or falls with the rate of chemical reactions in our body. In fact, our metabolism is the sum of all the reactions within us. The more reactions taking place, the faster our metabolism. And our metabolism is calibrated to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. A drop of only 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit results in a loss of approximately 50% of our enzymatic activity. Think of how many body functions are down-regulated when we see a drop in our body temperature. And that's because every loss of optimal enzyme activity means a loss of functionality for a given organ, tissue, or body part. So this is an image from a biochemistry textbook where on the x-axis is degrees in Fahrenheit, and then on the y-axis is percentage of maximum enzyme activity. So as you can see, the lower the temperature, the slower the chemical reaction. And as the temperature increases, the reaction rate will go faster with each increase until it reaches its optimum reaction rate, which is this peak with the black dashed line. So why does this occur? Well, collisions between all molecules increase as temperature increases due to the increase in speed and kinetic energy. So faster speeds lead to less time between collisions, more molecules reaching an activation energy, and thus an increase in the rate of reactions. Most enzymatic functions are performed best at 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is shown by this black dashed line. Now, enzymes will definitely still work at lower body temperatures, but much more slowly and not as optimally. And not every enzyme is super sensitive to temperature. The functions of some enzymes are more greatly affected by changes in body temperature than others. So the enzymes that are more affected by body temperature are responsible for the, quote, non-essential functions, meaning our bodies can still stay alive if these enzymes are not operating properly or are downregulated. They are not required for momentary survival. So non-essential enzyme functions include the regulation of skin, hair, fingernail, and toenail health, your libido, cognitive function, and digestion. Think, if you were running away from a bear, what body functions are not really necessary for you to sprint at maximum speed and get away? So these are the first to go when our body temperature and metabolism slows. And this is our body's way of ensuring that depleted energy reserves are used to maintain the most important functions, such as vision, hearing, heart function, breathing, and all the other bodily functions necessary for survival. So the enzymes responsible for these more vital functions aren't as affected by changes in body temperature, and that's to keep us alive. However, a cooled organism can no longer support these luxuries associated with vigorous vitality. The body has to instead spend its limited resources focusing on survival. That is not living optimally. So our bodies leave an abundant and thriving life and instead step into survival mode. Now, just as a note, because some people will think of enzymes in our food, your diet can also influence your body's enzyme activity in digestion. And this is because certain foods contain digestive enzymes that help share the burden of the naturally occurring enzymes in your digestive tract. For example, raw milk contains the lactase enzyme to help your body break down lactose in the milk, which is why it may work better digestion-wise for some people. Now, an elevated body temperature, that lactase enzyme will be produced in the digestive tract. Now, the enzymes in food can certainly help, but they're not enough to support a healthy, functioning body. The state of your overall health will dictate how well your body produces, stores, and releases enzymes. Again, proper body heat is one of the fundamental pillars of good health. 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is an indication of vibrant health, strength, and vitality. So it makes sense why we'd want to shoot for body temperatures of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the temperature at which your body's enzymes will function at peak efficiency. One way to think about this is tuning into a radio station of 98.6. If you set the dial a little too low, you could still hear the radio program, but it's not optimal sound quality due to the background static. Now, if you fine-tune the station, then there's less static and the reception is clear. Now, humans can certainly still function if we aren't fine-tuned at the optimal 98.6, but we aren't functioning at our best. Unfortunately, in today's physiology books, a normal temperature is defined as a range of 97 to 98.8. These values are normal in the sense that one expects these values for people today, but they're not natural or optimal for a healthy person. These resources do not take into account how prevalent sluggish thyroid systems are in current time. In fact, very low body temperatures seem to be the norm these days. In the 1800s, Karl Reinhold August Wunderlich took approximately 1 million temperature readings from 25,000 people, and he discovered that the average body temperature at that time was 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, quite different than today. In fact, the body temperature of people today is at least 1 degree Fahrenheit lower than the values that were normal 180 years ago. A sick and weakened, cool organism has unfortunately become the norm today, and this reduction in our body temperature has actually coincided with the decline in our health, with an increase in chronic diseases and autoimmune conditions. So this cooling down is documented in a number of studies in the literature, which show a decline in temperature from the 1800s to 2000, and these trends continue to today. Now, while our body temps have gone down, we've also seen a coinciding rise in the rates of chronic disease development. This image is from Jeff Nobbs, and it shows in the 1930s, the rate of chronic disease prevalence was 7.5%, which has increased to above 60% today. In addition, we've also seen an increase in the number of years the average American deals with a chronic disease, meaning they develop a chronic disease earlier in life and have to deal with and live with a chronic disease for a longer number of years. In fact, the US is the only developed nation with a decline in our healthy life expectancy, which is the number of years we live disease-free. So despite having an increase in technology and data about the human body, our healthy life expectancy has gone down in the last 2 measurement periods. So we'll now cover some of the consequences of low body temperature. So it's important to understand the systemic mechanisms that our thyroid affects. Again, thyroid affects every level of our body function. Blood glucose, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, energy production, digestion, fertility and ovulation, heart rate, reflexes, cold hands and feet. So for this last point, cold hands and feet, our internal vital organs must operate at a certain temperature. And so adrenaline works to pull blood flow away from your skin and extremities to preserve heat for your organs if your overall body temperature is otherwise low. So how can low body temps impair blood sugar regulation? Well, when you become hypothyroid or do not have a well-functioning thyroid system, your metabolism slows, your body temperature drops, and your liver loses its ability to regulate blood sugar. And to compensate, your body will overproduce the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol. So in a compensatory state, when you have a compromised thyroid system, your body will increase the stress hormones as a temporary response in order to maintain homeostasis. Your body recruits stress hormones to maintain its function when your body temperature is low. And to prevent blood sugar from falling dangerously low, if it did, we would die, cortisol will break down muscle tissue in your body or the protein that we consume dietarily to convert it into sugar through gluconeogenesis. And this will raise the blood sugar. So these are backup pathways that are meant to be used for emergencies only. And problems arise when we rely on these chronically, leading to further thyroid suppression. In fact, the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol block the conversion of T4 to active T3 in the liver, which is required for your cells to be able to use thyroid hormone. So it's a perpetual negative cycle. Another consequence of low body temps is impaired digestion, since digestive enzymes work at a reduced rate in colder temperatures. So the operating temperature of our digestive organs play a critical role in how our foods are digested. And to be digested properly, everything we ingest should reach the ideal body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. None of our digestive organs can work at full capacity unless they reach this temp. So slowing the digestive system means food sits in our stomach for too long and starts to ferment, leading to poor digestion, endotoxin development, and potentially nutrient deficiencies. So lower temps also reduce immunity, since lower temperatures are an ideal environment for pathogens like bacteria and viruses to grow. Defective temperature distribution or deficient body heat regulation can be detected in most chronic illnesses. Have you ever thought about why we get fevers when we get sick? A quote from the literature is, quote, "The hotter our body temperature, the more our bodies speed up key defense systems that fight against tumors, wounds, or infections." Another quote, "Higher body temperature helps the immune system to fight against the common cold." And so this is well documented by a number of researchers across the world. Professor Hiromi Shinya, PhD at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, confirmed that lowering the body temperature by only 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit results in a 30% decline in enzyme and immune activity. He also discovered that cancer cells can multiply much faster at 95 degrees Fahrenheit than at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The conclusion from his studies, quote, "Humans with low body temps have decreased immunity, suffer circulation disorders, have increased genetic changes, and thus an increased cancer risk." Now, Professor Abo from Japan reported a 40% improvement in the function of the immune system by raising the body temperature by only 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Ishihara Yumi, PhD from Japan, established that our immune system is 5 to 6 times stronger when the body temperature is increased by 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Inversely, the immune system is weakened by 30% if the body temp is lowered. So his statistical analyses revealed a decline in body temperature amongst the Japanese population by an average of 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 50 years. Raising the body temperature is always synonymous with an increased immune system. In fact, Hippocrates, over 2,500 years ago, said, quote, "Give me fever and I can cure every disease." Lower body temps also lead to poor detoxification due to reduced function of your liver enzymes. So optimal body temperatures restore the proper flow of bodily fluids to promote detox from all the environmental toxins that we're exposed to. Many heavy metals are very problematic since they can be deposited deep within connective tissue. Warm tissues, warm blood, and warm lymph vessels ensure a better supply of oxygen to help improve the dissolution and binding of toxins. So warmer bodies will detox better. Now, additional consequences of lower body temps include a reduced ability to cope with physiological stressors and strains, reduced motivation, reduced response time and accuracy for cognitive tasks, reduced oxygen supply, impaired moods, and an increased tendency to hold on to fat and regain fat. This is a super important point. So a low body temperature often protects fat stores in the body in order to maintain an already low body temperature. And that's because, like we mentioned earlier, internal vital organs must operate at a certain body temperature. So your internal organs are going to tell the body to preserve those fat cells to protect them from the cold and preserve the little warmth the organism has in the central area of our body. In fact, lower core body temps have been shown to lead to higher chances of weight regain after a diet, and it is well known that obese people have lower body core temperatures. The importance of a sufficient body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is unfortunately neglected by most medical professionals, since there's not a pill that can fix this. It requires lifestyle and dietary changes to bring one back to optimal temperatures. The best anti-aging method is to keep your body temperature up to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so now let's transfer over to pulse and provide a little bit more background information as to why the pulse is an important metric to monitor in addition to the body temperature. So as we mentioned earlier, body temperatures can be influenced by a number of things besides thyroid. For example, sleeping with heated blankets, living in a hot climate, or living on stress hormones. Thus, it's important to include the pulse measurement to help interpret those temperature readings. According to Dr. Pete, someone with good thyroid function will have a resting pulse rate between 80 and 95 beats per minute. If you think about it, your pulse rate is how your hormones and nutrients actually get to your cells to support a healthy metabolism. A slower pulse means less nutrients and less thyroid hormone actually getting to your cells in a given period of time. We personally used to think we wanted a lower pulse rate since athletes' resting heart rates are typically much lower. But despite popular belief, a low heart rate is not necessarily a sign of health. It's a sign of a fit body, but just because you're fit does not mean you're healthy. In fact, low resting heart rates are associated with atrial fibrillation in athletes. That low pulse of athletes is actually a compensatory mechanism for all the stress that they put themselves under. Many fit individuals, especially endurance athletes, have low resting pulses in the 40s to 60s and a low body temperature in the 94s to 96s. So due to their high level of cardiovascular activity, their bodies have adapted to their ongoing and prolonged stress state. So endurance exercise will strengthen the heart muscle, allowing it to pump a greater amount of blood with each beat. More oxygen is thus delivered to the muscles with each beat, allowing for a slower pulse rate. So the athlete is becoming more efficient, using less energy to perform the same amount of work. Now, this will certainly be helpful during a performance or a competition, but this slowed metabolism will have negative long-term effects like low libido, impaired digestion, increased aging, thinning of the hair, and the list goes on. Now, in times of stress, your stress hormones will increase and your thyroid hormones will slightly lower, which will decrease heat production, body temperature, and pulse. And so if you exercise regularly, you may have slightly lower pulses. So if you're between 75 and 80 as an athlete, maybe 70 to 80, we think that's okay. Lower than 70, however, definitely indicates a compromised thyroid function. But if you are not very active and your pulse is lower than 80, then this is indicative of thyroid issues. And higher than like 95 indicates that you are likely running on stress hormones. Now, it's important to remember that our body temperature and pulse will not be constant throughout the day. In fact, our body temperature is on a circadian clock as shown in this image. So according to Dr. Broda Barnes, we should have a waking body temperature between 97.8 and 98.2 degrees Fahrenheit. It should then continue to rise through early afternoon to reach 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit and then slightly decrease towards bedtime. A waking temperature less than 97.8 degrees Fahrenheit can indicate hypothyroidism. So now, given this ideal pattern, the circadian rhythm of our body temp, we want to measure a few times during the day to, 1, see if stress hormones are at play, and 2, see if your meals are actually working for you in increasing your body temperature, meaning they're helping you produce energy. So hypothyroid people, or those with sluggish thyroids, can compensate for low cellular energy by increasing stress hormones. And these stress hormones can keep your pulse and temperature artificially high. And like we mentioned, stress hormones are highest in the morning before you eat breakfast. So if you are running on stress hormones, you may have a high waking temp, but then you'll see a drop in your temperature after breakfast as those stress hormones are allowed to normalize with the increase in blood sugar from the food that you just consumed. So you can separate the effect of your stress hormones from your thyroid function by measuring your body temperature and pulse before and after breakfast and then throughout the day. So we'll now walk through an example measurement template. So first, obviously, the upon waking body measurement, and a waking temp less than 97.8 degrees Fahrenheit can indicate hypothyroidism. And if it's greater than 97.8 degrees Fahrenheit, let's look at post-breakfast measurements to see what's up. So a good second measurement would be 40 to 50 minutes after breakfast. So you're going to compare the temperature before and after breakfast to rule out whether or not you are running on stress hormones in the morning. So again, eating breakfast will increase your blood sugar and suppress the stress response. So if your temp falls after breakfast, you are running on stress hormones and you likely have a sluggish thyroid system. This post-breakfast temperature is likely closer to your true basal body temperature. Now, if your post-breakfast temperature rises, let's now compare that to an afternoon measurement. So a third measurement could be around 1 or 2 p.m. If your afternoon temperature drops relative to your post-breakfast temperature, this could indicate you may have a blood sugar handling issue, which directly affects how your thyroid functions. So as a reminder, your temperature should steadily increase from measurement 1 to 2 to 3. So we'll now cover a little flow chart using information from Dr. Broda Barnes and Dr. Ray P. to determine if a meal size or a meal composition works for you and is providing you with energy. So, case 1, your temperature and your pulse fall after a meal. Well, the increased temp and pulse prior to the meal were likely due to elevated levels of stress hormones, not a high metabolic rate. Case number 2, your temperature stays the same. Well, maybe that meal is a little too low in calories or it's not the right mix of macronutrients. Case number 3, you have a high pulse before your meal and the meal increases your pulse even more. That's a pretty clear sign that that meal contained too much protein relative to carbs. So try playing around with your carb to protein ratio. Case number 4, you have a low pulse before your meal and then it increases after the meal. That's a good meal and your thyroid hormones may have increased. Case number 5, you have a high pulse and a low temperature before the meal and then your temp increases and your pulse decreases after the meal. Again, another good meal. Your thyroid is working properly by lowering stress hormones and increasing heat production. Case number 6, you have low pulse and low temp before a meal, and both rise after eating. Again, that's a great meal. That meal is helping you produce energy. The temp and pulse measurements are a super simple way to gauge whether you are running on stress hormones and to monitor your thyroid function. As we mentioned, these readings can also help you determine if certain foods, meal timing, food pairing, or meal sizes are working for you. So you can take additional measurements before and after, 40 to 50 minutes after, other meals throughout the day to test if those are working for you. A metabolically stimulating meal should be used as fuel and produce ATP, heat. So the meal should increase both your temp and your pulse. If your pulse and temperature slightly fall, that meal may not be optimal. So again, use your body temperature and pulse as a way to test out whether certain foods that you may be reintroducing, whether carb to protein ratios in a certain meal or the whole meal size is working for you. If your body temps and pulse aren't optimal, some part of your thyroid system is blocked. It doesn't matter how much thyroid hormone your system is actually producing. If it can't get to the cell and be used by the cell, you'll always be hypothyroid. But remember, this can be fixed. Our body is resilient and wants to heal. Now, should I take my body temperatures using oral measurements or should I use armpit measurements? Well, Dr. Broda Barnes originally used underarm for temperature measurements. That's because the temperature of our extremities can sometimes be a better indicator of how our body temperature is distributed throughout the body. And when we're in fight or flight mode, our bodies do not prioritize sending heat to our extremities and instead conserve it for our vital organs. So for some individuals, their thermometer, unfortunately, can be very inconsistent for underarm readings, and so using oral is totally fine. We most often use oral because it's a little bit more convenient. So if oral is more convenient and allows you to stay consistent with tracking your body temperature, that is totally fine. Just keep in mind that your armpit can be 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit lower than oral. Now, some things to keep in mind when you're taking your temperature. You want to make sure you give the thermometer probe time to reach temperature. So you want to calibrate it. So first, place the probe under your arm for 5 minutes or place it in your mouth for 3 minutes before you click the button on the thermometer to read the temp. Now for pulse, you can use a pulse oximeter, or you can just count your heartbeats for 15 seconds and then multiply that by 4. So just put your finger on your wrist or on your neck at a place where you can feel your pulse, count the number of heartbeats with a timer set to 15 seconds, and then multiply that measurement by 4. You also want to make sure you remain seated for at least 20 to 30 minutes before taking your measurements, since any physical exertion, like even walking, can skew results. You also want to wait at least 30 minutes after a meal, and that's because oral readings are not accurate too close to eating or drinking, since your mouth temperature is impacted by your food or drink. It also takes your body a little bit of time to break down that food and produce energy. You also want to avoid recording when you are sick, since again, that can raise your body temperature. And you don't want to record if you slept under an electric blanket, since again, that can artificially elevate your body temperature. Now for females, be cognizant of your cycle. Days 2 to 4 of menstruation will typically give you the most accurate results. That's because your body temperature will fluctuate throughout your cycle. Now, you do not have to take these measurements daily. We do think it's important to perform consistently when you're just starting out this style of eating and you're trying to increase your body temperature. But if you get to a good place, you can totally just do this periodically or seasonally. The temp and pulse test can be used to test out any dietary changes, so how you react to certain foods. And it can also be used in periods of time when you change medications or add in new supplements. Now for some thermometer tips. So as a reminder, there's no perfect thermometer, and some can be very inaccurate. In fact, every electronic thermometer will give moment-to-moment variations of some tenths of a degree or more. So the goal is to find one that provides consistent readings and to use that same thermometer every time. Remember, trends are more important than super high accuracy. For example, does your thermometer give the same measurement when you repeat the test 3 times in a row? If not, then that is not a good thermometer. From our experience, digital thermometers with 2 significant figures are the best option and are pretty inexpensive, and they will work well for tracking your temperature changes over time. As a note though, the forehead non-contact thermometers are not very accurate. So the best option would be to purchase 2 different digital thermometers and compare their readings for the first few days. Are you getting consistent recordings between the 2? Also, for your actual readings, we advise measuring 3 times in a row. So calibrate your thermometer, put it in your mouth for 3 minutes or under your arm for 5 minutes, and then click the button to take a measurement and do that 3 times in a row and use the highest value. So other things that can negatively impact your body temperature include alcohol, infection or illness, a restless night of sleep, a lot of stress, strenuous exercise, fasting, or under eating. So just keep these in mind as you're taking your body temps because, sometimes these things happen and that's okay. And your body will bounce back. Just recognize that they could lead to a few days of poor measurements, but over time, your body temp will bounce back and get higher. Now, your symptoms should definitely improve as your body temperature and pulse data improves. And that's because your metabolism is improving, your body is producing more energy in order for your body to perform more functions. However, we do not want to obsess over temperatures. We want to use them as a gauge if we are improving and moving in the right direction. Don't let your body temperatures define you. And if you need a break from recording your body temperature, that is totally okay. It's also okay if you're not perfectly in the 97.8 to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit range. If you are slightly under and you feel good without symptoms, if you're pooping well, you're sleeping well, you're happy, you have energy, then that's okay. Now in the remainder of this guide, we will provide you with the tools to help you experiment and improve your body temperatures and achieve optimal health. Cheers to getting warm. So before wrapping up this section, I just want to point you to an important resource for you to utilize in the resource section of this module. And it is a PDF that helps you understand why body temperature and pulse measurements are important, and it also guides you to documenting it and how to record body temperature and pulse measurements. There's also a data tracker section where you can record your body temperature and pulse. Remember, you are not doomed. However, if we don't record data, it's hard to assess what's actually moving the needle forward for our health. So you're not doomed. You can fix and heal your metabolism, but it can be helpful to keep track of that as we make dietary and lifestyle changes.